everyone. As many people viewing this recording may recall, on April 15th, as part of our Honoring Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we held our second Celebrating Resilience speaker series, and Brenda Tracy was our very special guest. That event had to be cut short due to a harmful and very disturbing Zoom bombing that occurred near the end of that program. But Brenda has been generous enough to offer a second opportunity for us to speak with her today. For security and safety reasons, we've decided that I would continue my conversation with Brenda one-on-one, that we would record it and send a YouTube link to the public after. But just to recap a bit about Brenda, she is a nurse, a mother, an activist, and a survivor. And she shared with us her very powerful story of resilience. In 1998, Brenda reported to police that she was brutally raped by 4 men, 2 of whom played football at Oregon State University. In 2014, Brenda came forward with her story publicly and uses her voice now to help make the world a better place for survivors. Thank you again, Brenda, for coming today and taking this time to talk with me.
Thank you so much for having me again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So just prior to the Zoom bombing, you had just told us a little bit about the threats and backlash that you receive on a very regular basis. I'd like to start by asking you first, how are you doing?
Yeah, it's a little ironic. It feels like that was what, I mean, the timing of everything, but yeah, I'm doing okay since then. I really wanted to be on this call because I wanted to make sure that the people that were on the call are okay, or at least wanted to extend my warm wishes to them. I know that what happened can be very triggering. There's a lot of things that can be very triggering, but that was just especially evil. I just don't know what type of person decides to do that sort of thing. But I also know that whenever survivors gather, there's a lot of light and there's a lot of strength. And there are people that don't want us to do that. They don't want us to share our stories. They don't want us to step into the strength and the power that we have. And they don't want us to gather. And so I think that was an attempt to disband us in the moment. And so it's even more important for me to be back here again to say, you will not silence me.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. You and I spoke minutes after it happened, and that was the first thing you asked was, how is everybody else doing? Which I thought was amazing. And then you wanted to make sure that everyone knew that you were not going to be silenced and that we shouldn't either. So we are resilient together in that. So I'll just continue with the questions that we had in store for you.
Okay.
Let me start off, actually, at that time, you were getting ready to talk a little bit about self-care and what you do for yourself and what you might advise others to do to take care of themselves as they go through this journey. So can you talk a little bit more with us about self-care?
Yeah, I definitely, when I first stepped forward with my story, I had other activists and advocates who would tell me, like, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself. Self-care has got to be number one. And I kind of listened, but not really, right? I didn't realize at the time, like, how important it was. And I don't think I realized what it was. So in the beginning, I thought self-care was like vacations, getting your hair done, going to the spa, right? Shopping, something like that, which weirdly all required money. But what I learned along the way is that self-care is whatever it looks like for that person. What did they need to do to be able to rest, recharge, just even if it's just a couple minutes of time and peace and quiet. What does it look like for that person and their circumstances? So I think that it's unfortunate that people think that self-care has to look a certain way, and that a lot of times it does cost money the way we think it should look, which makes it inaccessible to some people. I think a lot about, you just single moms that have kids and it's like, okay, how do I take care of myself when I'm just like constantly running around all day after these kids? And so we have to just decide that self-care looks like whatever we want it to be. So for that mother, it could just be like 5 minutes in the bathroom by herself or themselves, right? For me, my self-care days look like me doing nothing. Like literally, that's what I want to do for my self-care. I want to do nothing. I don't want to be on the phone. I don't want to be taking calls. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be on social media. So I spend a lot of time just watching TV, and I like to eat cereal. So I brush my hair probably most times, but a lot of times I'll just be in my sweat, my pajamas all day, and I watch TV and I eat cereal. So
I love that.
That's my self-care day.
Good for you. I love that. And the most powerful thing is that everybody define it the way that they need to define it for themselves.
Yes, and based on, their life and what's going on for them. And it doesn't have to look like anything but what that person wants it to be. And it was hard for me at first, you're right? Doing nothing I felt guilty doing nothing. But it was what I wanted to do. But I also had to set boundaries. So like my family, I'd be like, nope, today I'm doing nothing. Like I'm doing nothing. I'm not getting on my phone. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And then I also had to write it into my calendar because I would travel constantly. And I would let my assistant just, fill up my calendar. And so I was traveling like, 310, 15, 20 days a year. And so I would literally just write on my calendar, like, no, this is self-care day and you need to stick with it. So self-care is also very intentional. You have to make time for self-care. If you don't, eventually you think, oh, I'm okay. Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. And then you look back and you're like, oh, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm not okay.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. What can our community do to continue to educate others on the subject of sexual violence?
I think that I think it's probably up to each person. I guess when you say our community, do you mean survivors or do you mean who
The community,
you mean?
the community in general, what can we do as allies, as survivors? What do we do to to better educate those in the general public?
So I think when it comes to survivors, one of the things I just want to say is that I just feel like the burden of the labor and the onus of the work should not be all on survivors. And I think we see that happen a lot. And I even have people say to me, well, I'm not a survivor. Nothing's happened to me. It's not my place. And I'm like, no, actually it is your place because the burden shouldn't be on me and other people like me to do this work. It should be on other people that have not experienced this type of trauma to do that work too. So I just want to say that first. But for the community, I think the first thing we really need to do is just communicate with each other. I think find out like, what are the needs of survivors? What do we need people to know? Like what I need you to know is probably different than maybe what someone else thinks we need. I feel like I see a lot of times that people have about what survivors need, even us to sit at what. So deferring to survivors for those that want to do the work and want to be involved, like I do. I want a seat at the table. I would like to talk about these things, making sure that we are talking to all sectors of our community, survivors. We're anybody and everybody, right? There's we cross all lines of gender identity, race, socioeconomics, religion, sexual violence does not discriminate. Anyone can be a survivor. But I definitely think that having conversations, talking about victim blaming and trauma, I think are two super important things. I really feel like we don't understand trauma as a society. And so we don't understand how it affects survivors. We don't understand how it affects the way we report. We don't understand how it affects consent. We don't understand how victim blaming affects our inability to create legislation, create policies, hold people accountable. And we just have a very just a broad misunderstanding of who survivors are, what our experience is, how it goes. And we just make these decisions about which survivors matter. And I definitely think that, Tarana Burke talks a lot about how if we would take care of the most marginalized survivors, then everybody benefits from that. Right? Like if you only think about like me, white, straight woman as a survivor, and you're only taking care of, my needs, then what about the Black trans person, right? That person gets forgotten. So if we start with the most marginalized first, then we can make some headway.
Great, thank you for that. What has surprised you most about doing this work? You've been telling your story publicly, I believe since 2014, and you've been working with legislators and talking all across the country. What surprised you most?
I get this question a lot, and I can never really think of something that surprised me, but I do want to say the things that encourage me. And the things that encourage me the most are probably the men I work with. Probably because I view men as not just a problem. I mean, most sexual violence is, like 99% of sexual violence is committed by men against other men, women, children, and humans. But I think the idea that men are also the solution, that men have to have conversations with each other, hold each other accountable. We have to talk about language and all these things. Having men come forward to me to share their stories, to say, I never thought about anyone else but my mom and my sister or the women in my life that I care about. Having them just look at their ideas and their attitudes and their beliefs and reassess them and decide that I want to do better moving forward has really encouraged me a lot, because I know that, if the most affected people could fix this issue, we would have already done it. So this is a men's issue. So to have men get involved, that's just been extremely encouraging for me.
That's very powerful to say. So thank you for the work that you do with men and alongside men to make this world better. So I appreciate that. You have an organization, Set the Expectation. Tell us a little bit about your organization, when it started, what your mission is, whatever you might want us to know.
So it set the expectation that sexual assault and physical violence are never okay. And it was basically born of necessity, really. I started traveling the country, working with these big football programs, and I recognized immediately that there were certain coaches, men, standing in front of the room and telling, their male teams, football teams mostly, your behavior matters. And it's a privilege to play here, not a right. And if you harm someone, then you don't play here anymore. Like, you don't have the privilege of being on this pedestal, in front of the public and, wearing this jersey. And then I had other coaches who were victim blaming. They were harboring rapists. They were recruiting them. They were part of the problem. And I didn't understand the disparity amongst coaches, because I think in general, we just think that coaches are good people of good character, raising up good people of good character, because we've decided that all athletes are heroes. For whatever reason we do that. But I didn't understand the disparity between the coaches, and I needed them to all get on the same page. I needed them to draw the line in the sand with their players that your behavior matters. These are young people. If you think about the power of football alone, these are young men that are making, they're setting tones about culture and attitudes and beliefs. And we learn a lot about survivors and perpetrators through sports stories. And so we have to decide, what is being put out there. So these coaches have a lot to do with it. And so in an effort to try to get them on the same page, I created the Set the Expectation Pledge. Because at the end of the day, I thought, well, what do I want them to do? I want them to set the expectation. And so I created the pledge, and that kind of took off. And then it turned into awareness raising events. And then we do fundraising, and we partner with community agencies and campus agencies, and we just figure out, what do you need? How can the athletics department help you? How can we help further your cause? How can we use the sports platform to make a difference in on this campus or in this community? And so that's kind of how it started. And then it's, also the Tracy rule is just a policy form of set the expectation, which attaches eligibility to behavior. So if you harm someone, then you are ineligible to play sports.
Great. How many schools and universities have you visited or worked with or have aligned with you to set the expectation for their teams?
So I think I've been to just over 100 campuses now. And I want to say somewhere between 60 or 70 schools have participated in the campaign. Now, that doesn't mean that they've stayed the course. There's obviously a lot of work. I don't want anyone to ever think that just because a school signs on with set the expectation or a team signs a pledge that things are fixed, because that's not how this works. I can't eradicate rape with a pledge and me going to speak. So, we have to be realistic that this is the Titanic and I'm trying to turn it. I don't want to say Titanic, but a big ship that I'm trying to turn.
No, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And do you have a big vision for your organization? To be on 100 campuses is a lot. That's a big accomplishment. But do you see yourself, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how big do you plan to go or want to go?
I don't put any limitations on myself. And I don't think anyone should, actually. I think that, I think any person who has impacted history in a positive way, or any of the people we think about as, historic figures in our country, I think all of those people just believe that they could. And so I don't place any limits on myself. I believe that I can change the world. And why not me? Somebody has to do it, right?
That's right.
And so why not me? Or maybe it's me that's in a room that inspires the next person to change the world. So either way, there's me or someone else that I maybe inspire, the world's getting changed. So I take comfort in that. But I do have a big vision. I have a big vision about how I can support community agencies doing the work all across the country. I have big visions about my speaking career and how many men I want to reach, even just outside of athletics. Men are everywhere. They're in positions of power everywhere. And so all of them need to understand their ability to help or harm. They have the ability to create equality and equity. They have the ability to change things for people. They just need to understand that this is their issue. And what side of history are you going to be on?
Yeah. Well, Brenda, I believe you can change the world too.
Thanks.
And anything that we can do, anything we can do at Resilience to help you do that, particularly in and around the city of Chicago, please consider us a partner in this work.
Oh, yes. Yes.
We definitely want to do more with you and for your organization. I guess my last question for you is kind of, what haven't you been asked, or what is there that you would want people to know that that we may or may not know?
Oh, wow. I don't get asked that very much. I guess one of the things I just want to say to people is that, I want to make sure people understand that I'm just human. And especially for survivors, I think it's important for them to understand that, like, I'm a work in progress. So I may look bright and shiny and like I have it together, but I don't always. Like, I'm in therapy right now. I take antidepressants. I am doing EMDR right now. My, trauma to me is kind of like an onion. It's like you peel off a layer and then you find something else, and then you find something else, and then you find something else. And I, may spend a lot of years untangling the trauma that I've experienced, but that's okay too, right? Like,
that's right.
It's worth it. And I just don't want anyone to ever think like, well, she did it, she's healed, she's okay. Mm-hmm. And that's not the truth. I'm healing. I'm in the process, and I work really hard at it, because I don't think that trauma just goes away. You have to confront it and deal with it.
Lifelong impact.
Yeah, and you have to figure out what that looks like for you. But I really want people to know that, you know, I work at this every day, and I continue to prioritize my mental health and my healing. And I want to stand as a beacon of hope to survivors, but I also want to be very honest about the journey, right? I think sometimes we feel like we have to project this, like, I'm healed, I'm done. If I did it, you can do it too, instead of really projecting the reality of the process and how it can be. And there's ups and downs, and some days I'm better than others, and some days I'm depressed, and some days I'm not. And it's a whole thing, but it's real life. And so I think I want people to know that about me, because sometimes I have people that come to me and say like, oh, you're so strong, you're so courageous. And I'm like, well, thanks, but that's not how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so important. Brenda, thank you for sharing that. In particular, a friend of mine was sharing with me that her husband asked her, why wasn't she over it yet? It was something that happened to her prior to their marriage. And, you know, and so it's been, you know, 10 or 12 years later, and he wasn't sure or unclear, and asked, you know, why aren't you over it? So I thank you so much for sharing that. It can be a lifelong journey, and you're working at it every day. So I appreciate you
and it
sharing.
affects every aspect of your life. I mean, you are never the same after it happens. And so it affects the way you view the world. It affects your relationships. It affects the way you parent. It affects your finances. It affects everything. So, you know, we can't just think that, you know, oh, I think I fixed this one thing and now I'm okay. I mean, even the idea of forgiveness, which I want to say is, you know, for you, it's not for the person, it's for you making peace. But even that, I have days where I'm okay, and then other days I'm not. And it's just it just feels like a lot of things are just not like there's a finite moment where it's like it's done and it's closed. Right? Like I feel like it gets better, and it's not as triggering or hard, but it evolves and it changes. And so I just want survivors to be really nice to themselves. I can't tell you how many survivors I have, especially on college campuses, survivors that come to me and they'll say, well, it happened 5 years ago. I don't know why I'm not doing better. And I'm like, well, dang, that's not very long ago.
Right.
I'm like 2 years out and I'm still working on it. So
yeah.
But be true at once, right? I live a good life, but I also deal with trauma. So, and those two things can exist in one place at the same time. So you're not crazy. Survivors just are capable of feeling like a million things all at once.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much, Brenda. It's been such a pleasure to meet you and to have this conversation. I am 100% certain that someone will be encouraged and blessed as a result of hearing your story. So thank you for sharing your story, not just with us, but with the world. And as I previously mentioned, Consider Resilience partners with you as we all move forward to end sexual violence in our community. I'd also like to thank all of those that are viewing this recording, whether you saw the first one or not. I encourage you to go back and review the first recording. It was extremely powerful, that conversation, and Brenda shared her full story with us in that conversation. So if you have an opportunity to view it and you haven't, please do so. And we look forward to seeing everybody at our next speaker series events. News about that will be coming to you in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you, everybody, and be blessed.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Brenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you.